So one is Uber. The simple sort of story here is that early investors in Uber have done exceedingly well. And what I mean by exceeding, we're talking about 5,000 times their money, not percent, 5,000 times. So take an example, if you will, here. Sean Fanning, who may be a familiar name, he was one of the founders of Napster. He invested about $25,000 very early in Uber's development. Presuming he held that, this is a Wall Street Journal analysis, presuming he held that, his value of that investment would be about $124 million. So that is the enormity of what is possible in extreme cases. So a couple caveats here. Number one is, this is an extreme case, right? Uber was one of the most exceptional venture capital investments in history. So I just want to make clear, right? This does not happen every day. This is what is possible, but extraordinary. I'll also point out, Alumni Ventures didn't exist when Uber was created, right? So this is not an investment that we have held, but it is an example for you of what is possible, right? What is possible when a venture-backed business does exceptionally well. Now, another example I'm going to point to is Airbnb. Probably many of you have experienced Airbnb and sort of witnessed and are familiar with the change that has happened with its success. So we're going to start on this case way down here on the graph at 2008. So in essence, at that point, the valuation is something effectively as close to $0 billion as anything else. So, de minimis, if you will. And it's actually a great story of how some entrepreneurs made it through. So in the early days, it wasn't easy, right? They didn't have a lot of venture-backed money. They didn't have a lot of revenue yet. And so literally, and it's a story you should look up. It's a hilarious story. The founders of Airbnb bought Cheerios, I guess, and Captain Crunch cereal and repackaged the cereal and called them Obama O's and Captain McCain's during the election. And that is actually how they were able to pay off some of their credit card debt that they had accumulated to try to build Airbnb in the early days. It's amazing. And that's the kind of stuff that founders do all the time. Now, we don't often talk about the founders that never make it, right? Having done all of that kind of effort. But in this case, it worked. And so what you see as we continue down the graph here from 2008 to 2010, Series A. So that's as I was describing, where a lot of the venture capital money starts to pour in. And then gradually over time, boom, you get to 2014 and they really, started a rocket ship ride. But the other dimension I want to highlight in venture capital is it's not always a linear ride to the end. So what you see there in 2020 was a COVID down round. This is the case where Airbnb had raised capital at increasing valuations, but because of COVID, all of a sudden things changed. And so they raised a new round of capital at a pretty substantial decrease in valuation from 31 billion down to about 28 billion. That happens. It turns out that was a momentary blip, and they continued to succeed and actually very quickly accelerated to an IPO price over $40 billion. So it's a little bit of the story here of exceptional possibilities, not necessarily stable linear growth of trajectory, but the possibilities that can happen in early stage venture investing.